In 1796, a local ruler in Andhra Pradesh stumbled upon a massive, ruined earthen mound. Suspecting there was treasure hidden within the structure, he dismantled the ruins, repurposing the ancient carved stone as building material for a new temple. By the 1850s, British colonial officials were finishing what that ruler started. They systematically stripped the remaining sculptural panels from the site, using the carvings to decorate their personal gardens or shipping them to London. Amaravati had been one of the largest and most magnificent Buddhist structures ever built, but within a few decades of its discovery, the site was reduced to an insignificant mound of dirt, totally denuded of its sculptures. When the physical evidence is gone, the history behind it begins to evaporate. Without the stones to guide us, the intellectual world that built them becomes nearly impossible to see. Sanchi, located 400 miles away, avoided this fate. It was discovered later, in 1818, and preserved in situ, on the original site. Because its gateways and mound remained, we have a physical anchor to a period of massive change. To understand why Sanchi exists, we have to look back to 600 BCE. This was an era of global intellectual upheaval, where thinkers from Greece to China were beginning to question the nature of existence. In India, many were moving away from the early Vedic tradition. Religious life had been centered on elaborate sacrifices performed by Brahmin priests, where the effectiveness of a ritual was often tied to an individual's birth, gender, or social rank. Citizens began looking past these rituals, asking instead about the soul, the law of karma, and whether it was possible to escape the cycle of rebirth. These questions shifted the focus of religious life from the priest to the individual. This change in perspective created a demand for a new kind of sacred architecture, one that didn't house a god but served a community of seekers. This shift was driven by teachers like Mahavira, who popularized the Jaina tradition. He proposed a radical view of the world, that every stone, rock, and drop of water is animated with life. Because everything is alive, Mahavira taught that ahimsa, or non-injury to all living beings, was the highest virtue. By practicing self-control and renouncing the world, a person could finally free their soul from the binding weight of karma. While Mahavira emphasized severe penance, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, advocated for the middle path. He taught that the path to liberation lay between the extremes of luxury and hardship. The Buddha argued that the world is in a constant state of change. Since nothing is permanent, sorrow is intrinsic to life, but it can be ended by extinguishing the ego and desire, a state he called nibbana. These teachers emphasized individual action over priestly rituals. Because their philosophies centered on the memory of human teachers rather than the presence of divine gods, their followers didn't build traditional temples. Instead, they built monuments around the physical remains, the relics of the thinkers themselves. These monuments, called stupas, began as simple mounds of earth. Because they contained relics regarded as sacred, the entire structure became an emblem of the Buddha's path. The construction of Sanchi reflects the community it served. Inscriptions on the railings show that it wasn't built by a single king, but through hundreds of small donations from ivory workers, merchant guilds, and ordinary monks. The structure follows a precise symbolic logic. The base is the anda, a hemispherical mound of Onav. Above it sits the harmika, a balcony-like structure that represents the home of the gods. Rising from the center is a mast topped by a symbolic umbrella. Worshippers would enter through one of the 4 carved gateways, or toranas, and walk clockwise around the mound, keeping the sacred space on their right to imitate the sun's course through the sky. This was a cosmological map etched into stone, a physical representation of the Buddhist teachings that a massive community could navigate together. Sanchi gives us a remarkably intact view of this era, but even with the stones standing in their original places, we have to ask, can we see the whole story? Early scholars were puzzled by figures like this one, found on Sanchi's gateways. It's a sensuous image of a woman swinging from a tree, which seems to have very little to do with a religion based on renouncing the world. This is a Shalabanjika, an ancient pre-Buddhist folk symbol of a woman whose touch causes trees to flower. Its presence here shows that Buddhism didn't exist in a vacuum. It absorbed and integrated popular traditions to attract and comfort the people who visited the stupa. This blending of philosophical ideals and local customs would continue to evolve, eventually shaping the rock-cut temples and image-based worship of later Puranic Hinduism. The survival of Sanchi is a rare historical gift, but to truly understand these sites, we must look at the intersection of the surviving architecture, the recovered texts of the thinkers, and the people's daily lives who walked these paths 2,000 years ago.